So welcome. I'm Dr. Bart Rademaker, Prescription for Your Transformation, Real People, Real Success, and Real Conversations. And I'm going to introduce right away this incredible author, speaker, transformational leader, as well as educator, and that's Gregg Korrol. And I want to thank you for joining me today because you have something very important to share with people. And the truth is that, we all tell ourselves a story. We have to create meaning in all the things that we experience in our daily lives. We are creatures of meaning, if you will. And the problem that sometimes that we face is that, whatever meaning we give something, that then becomes our focus, and that then also becomes our destiny. And so what you've done is tremendous. You've written a book, and it's the gifted storyteller. It's the gift that I guess that you get to give yourself when you want to have a story, when you want to have a destiny that really serves you at a much better level. So Gregg, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Bart. I really appreciate it.
So tell me a little bit about yourself, because, you don't just come up with the idea of storytelling. And, I'm excited to hear that your vast background, your background in education and philosophy, and something that's also very dear to me, which is Eastern philosophy. And it's something that not many of us have really had a chance to experience or dive into. And so what's been the genesis of your current thinking, if you will, that's leading you to actually share this very fundamental and transformative concept about stories?
It's really a combination of, I guess, a lifetime of experience, but there was always a curiosity within me in terms of why do we do the things that we do? Why can 10 people look at a situation and come up with 10 different reasons why it's happening, and then 10 different next steps? Personally, I studied at Stony Brook University. I graduated with a degree in psychology. I minored in philosophy of the mind and body, which interestingly enough, I completely forgot about the actual title of my minor until somebody asked me what I minored in. But yeah, it's very much with the mind and body. And then I got into education, not necessarily by choice, but by passion. In other words, after graduating school, I was going to take a little time off before going on to the next step, and gave substitute teaching a try, and honestly fell in love with education. And now 20 plus years later, I'm an administrator in education, but it's something I've always stuck with and always loved. In terms of writing, it's just something, again, I always liked writing. I always liked, from way back when I think the first time I started writing, I was probably like 10 or 11, when I would write poems or write down a dream or document something that was going on. And it's just always been something that I find, for the most part, comes to me. I enjoy it and enjoy expressing myself in that manner. The gifted storyteller really, it's really a combination of an entire journey, and reflects kind of my journey. But you asked, in terms of the title, it was really about, the original title of the book was actually Storyteller, because I understood that when you encounter a situation in life, whatever it may be, you see it kind of as it's happening, but then your mind is filtering it, if you will, and spinning a story about what's happening. You're trying to fill in the blanks, you're trying to fill in the pieces you don't understand, and you're trying to make sense, as you were saying earlier, make sense of the world and make sense of what you're seeing. So it was Storyteller for a while, until actually one night, and I think it was an award show I was watching, and it was Mark Wahlberg, and that's the first time I'm actually saying this out loud, but it was Mark Wahlberg, Marky Mark. He was presenting an award, and he referred to somebody as a gifted storyteller. And I was like, literally, my wife and I were in the bedroom, we're just like watching the show, and I just turned to her, my mouth dropped, and I'm like, that's it. Because anything with that much power, that has so much power, that can take any situation and make it into a real opportunity, or turn it into something that you can be incredibly depressed about, or then somebody else can say, find out what's funny about it, and so forth. That's a gift. That's a blessing. That's something that has a lot of power and a lot of control. So I term the mind your gifted storyteller, because it's constantly creating these amazing stories about what's going on. And again, the story you would create about the situation versus the story I might create can be two very different stories.
That's amazing, because, the truth is that, we have the resources that we've been taught and that we've learned over time. And part of the challenge that so many of us have, perhaps, is that we just don't know what we don't know. And so
Mm.
educating people about this particular concept clearly can change people's lives. But then the
Hmm.
question that I have for you then is that how do you get to master, the better storytelling, if you will? I mean, what is that secret? What is it that approach that you might be sharing with the listeners to say, okay, this is how you can tap into a better story and have a better gift?
Um, yeah, it's actually somebody asked me a similar question this morning when they were asking for some help with something. And I get to refer again to Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, people I've read, Dan Millman. Of course, there's tons of philosophy out there also. And, I don't know who wrote everything per se, but it all came down to really questioning. In other words, when you feel a certain way, or you think you're seeing something a certain way, questioning, well, what am I missing here? What am I not seeing? What's good about this situation that I'm not understanding? Like, for example, I'm shifting slightly. Like, every night when I put my daughter to bed, I read with her. And she's gotten into recently about a year or two ago, American Girl books. And a lot of the American Girl books, at the end of it, they refer to real girls who are in real life. And there was this story about a 9-year-old who was telling her story. She was in circus school. And she was saying that in circus school, she wants to be a clown. So she's going to school to be a clown, even at 9. But they train her to see the funny. So something occurs and she has to find
Mhm.
immediately, well, what's funny about this? What would make me laugh about it? What might make another person laugh about it? And like I bring it up because it just always stuck with me because that's, I'm sure, what comedians do. Something presents itself and their mindset is to question what's humorous about this? What might make somebody just laugh or take this lightly or maybe even make somebody uncomfortable about it if you want to go that route. So the more you start asking a certain type of question, which you're already doing anyway, the more it comes quicker to you. So
Right.
in my life and my personal, the way I handle things, when difficult situations come up,
Mhm.
I sit there and I say, well, what is in this for me? What's good about this and what can I learn from this situation? And I'll take note if a situation comes in and out of my life numerous times because I read somewhere, and this was, I think, 12 Principles for Life, or I read it somewhere where it basically said the universe has, one way of getting your attention. It presents a situation, and if you don't get it, it increases the pain factor. So
Right.
eventually you start to
Mhm.
understand. Um, and that always stayed with me. So it's like, again, when something occurs, well, what's here for me? Why is this being given to me and what can I get out of this? So oftentimes, and I think about relationships or friends I've had in relationships. So if something is going awry in the relationship, sometimes they think, well, I just can't take it anymore and I want to leave the relationship or I want to get divorced or something like that. And I'll say to them, okay, so you know that route. And I'm not saying not to rule it out, but you know that route. What else is present here that you're not seeing? What path, how would the path change if you stayed the course? Or if you reflected on something that you might do different, which would create a different outcome? Make sense?
Right.
So I use questioning a lot when trying to,
It's interesting you say that
yeah.
because in our world, especially in the world of therapy, if you will, and counseling, and sometimes in education as well, too often we're actually being told what to think versus having you have that opportunity to think for yourself. Because one thing I do know is that the internal dialogue or the internal resource that you can tap into coming up with your own answers typically are a lot more powerful than the ones that are given to you. And so that's why I totally agree with you. The power of questions is really important. And I think one of the challenges, and you and I know this very well, is that the quality of questions, is really key. The better questions that you're going to ask, the better answers you're going to have. So if you ask this question like, why am I failing all the time? Or why am I in so much pain all the time? Then obviously you're going to answer that question and you'll remain stuck. And that's why I like what you shared with me earlier on, is that in the storytelling, you really start looking at what is it that you really want. What's the positive? What's great about this? And versus, what's wrong with it.
Right. Because that honestly is relatively easy to see. It's like looking at a shirt, you automatically go to the stain on the shirt, so to speak. Um, and we do that. We it's a self protection mechanism. It's making sure that I'm okay. If I don't have to deal with this, I'm okay. And those questions are not always easy to ask, but whoever said life would be easy, right? You know, Sometimes it's a matter of pushing through that boundary and pushing through that feeling of being stuck or feeling of being uncomfortable, because there is a gift there for you. There's always something there for you. And I think about it a lot of times. Again, something I was talking to somebody recently about, because she was having a problem with a coworker, somebody she was working with. And I was like, but that person, maybe they annoy the crap out of you, excuse my language, but they're also a gift to you. They're there to help you discover something.
Yes.
Maybe it's to be more patient. Maybe it's to be more kind. Maybe it's to learn to put yourself in another mindset or another person's perspective. But there's always something there that's going to benefit you and help you. And I don't mean it in a self-centered kind of way or a selfish kind of way, but the more you develop yourself and the more you're understanding, or the more you have a wider view of what's going on, the more you're going to be able to help other people. A lot of times, we want to help other people, and I do that constantly in my life too. And I work with a lot of people who their whole life is about giving to others, but you can't fill somebody else's cup if your jar is empty.
Right.
You got to work on you too in that process, and the better you are, you're going to be able to give so much more love and so much more compassion and kindness and other things to people.
And what's interesting, what you just shared, and to be even more specific, is that, when you focus on what's wrong, guess what? You're not focusing on what's right. So whatever, in any given moment, what's wrong can also, you can find something that is, very much right. But that's also a mindset. And I share the same mindset with you. And my question for you, have you always had that mindset where you look at things?
You're breaking up a little, I'm sorry.
So you look at things and you see, is there anything better here? Is that mindset that you've always had? Or is that something that over time you've developed simply because of your own personal growth and education?
I think it comes partially from my whole life. I come from a divorced family. So my parents were always at odds over things. So
Right.
I often spent a lot of time trying to make the peace, if you will, or find, well, what's good about this, or make the most of a situation. If I'm spending time with my mother, I wanted that to be good times. If I'm spending time with my father, I'd wanted that to be good times. So I think, sometimes things happen in your life which are not always comfortable, but lead to better things later on. So I don't know if that mindset was in other words, I'm not saying I was born with it per se, but I think circumstances forced me to look at how I can help. And something I use in the book, which I think is a great analogy, just one second. So it's like I put this right in the beginning of the book. Cover flash for a second. But I use this picture. I'm sure you could see it from there, which you've probably seen before. It's a very common optical illusion, but I think it's a very concrete way of looking at it. Because if you look at it one way, you're seeing the two faces looking at each other. If you look at the other way, the vase is there. Neither one is wrong. But if you focus on one of those, you're going to tell a certain type of story to yourself, and therefore you're going to act a certain way and proceed a certain way and interact a certain way. You focus on the vase, it's a different story. Both are there. But I use optical illusions a lot, like to try and explain this, because I feel it's a very easy way to do it. In other words, again, both options, the vase, the two faces, they're there for you to see. Life works the same way. There's always multiple things for you to see. It's like those 3D images that they used to have, and people would stare at them until it would kind of pop out. And some people could very easily, like, boom, it would pop out and they'd see another alternative. And other people would just sit there, like, holding it up to the light and all around, and they just couldn't get it. But that's kind of what it's like. That's kind of what life is like. How can I take this situation and make it an opportunity rather than make me feel sad or make me feel terrible and, in a sense, lock me down? Because that's what happens when you start seeing the negative and start seeing sadness. And I think it becomes a pattern. So like exercising, you train your muscles, you push yourself, you work on a muscle in different ways, whether it's your arms or chest, whatever you're working on, legs. You have to push that. You have to extend yourself and push yourself. And that's what we have to do with our minds too. And that questioning of asking, well, what am I not seeing? What am I missing here? I see the vase. Where are the two faces? That push is what expands your life and it opens your perspective on life.
And that question you just shared is absolutely key. What am I not seeing? What is it that I don't know? that could make a difference in my life. And I think too often, again, people are just ignoring that question. They're just, stuck in the middle of the woods and not really allowing themselves to see what's out there. So what kind of strategies do you talk about? Strategies specifically in your book where you actually guide people as to how they can become much more disciplined and finding that gifted story?
Well, the book is more of a story. It's a parable where
Okay.
basically you have this character named Michael, and Michael's kind of in a place where he's seemingly successful. In other words, he's done with school, has a great job, he's making money, he's independent, he's dating, friends. Everything seems good from an outsider's point of view, but yet he's feeling stuck. He's feeling like I'm just doing this routine on a hamster wheel
Right.
day in and day out, and is this it until I die?
Right.
And so what happens is a couple of that with the fact that he's in the process of losing his father. His father's dying right from the get-go of this book. His father's in the hospital. And, it's a lot of tough life situations. And one night he goes out, to a bar to have a drink after work, and he meets this woman named Jeannie. And of course, there's a play on words there, like the genie in the bottle. And Jeannie kind
Mhm.
of confronts him on the fact that he's doing what's called storytelling. In other words, she sees him at the bar sitting there, and he's just lost in la la land thinking, as we all often do. We kind of get into our own story, our own mind, and we imagine things or envision things to be a certain way. And she's just watching this happen. And we see this all the time. If you watch people, they're kind of lost in their thoughts. Sometimes they're
Right.
even gesturing with their hands, or their lips are
Right.
actually moving, but nobody's around them.
Right.
So we get lost, and she just calls him out right out on it. And right there kind of introduces him to the fact that his storyteller is creating stories which are not empowering him. It's keeping him away from being present in life. It's not making him look for what's good about what he has, etc. And so the story then unfolds where basically she comes in and out of his life during this relatively short period of time while he's dealing with work and while he's dealing with the loss of his father, and teaches him skills and strategies to help him understand where he is. So everything from being aware of the fact that you're doing this to how can you shift it. Personally, I find I learn best through stories. Like when I hear
Mhm.
stories, you kind of get lost into them and you get
Mhm.
locked into them. And half the times, if you think about it, when you're watching TV or a movie or reading a book, your mind will, you'll be reading halfway through the page and your mind will go off on a tangent because you're connecting it with something in your
Right.
own personal life. So that's what this kind of does, is it takes you through Michael's journey, which, as many of the reviews, like on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles, they kind of, a lot of people say, like, they identify with the character. It feels very familiar. And if you stay with the course with Michael, and it's a very short read, it's not a long book. It's pretty much everybody I've spoken to has read this in 1 to 2 settings. I think one person has said to me they're actually purposely put it down because they're really enjoying it and they don't want it to end,
Right.
which is funny because I'm like that sometimes with books too. But it's a quick read. It's meant to be
Right.
because a lot of people don't have time to read, but we have time to think. So that's what this
Right.
story does. It really guides you, yes, through strategies and through tools to help you start telling a better story for yourself.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I totally agree with you. I also wrote a book, and it's a short book. It's an easy read because we just don't have the time unless you're dedicated like yourself and myself to personal growth. We go to the courses and we learn all these things. The rest of the world, necessarily doesn't have that. And so that's an awesome gift that you're sharing because, it's true that we do learn much more quickly, through storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's much more effective because you can relate to that instead of getting the statistics or data and then start
Yeah,
wondering you're judging this or not. So I love that. So is there a sequel to this?
there is. I'm actually working on it right now. Yeah, so I'm working on it. It's interesting because, you think somebody had asked me, like, is it the same kind of thing, same characters? And yes, it's the same characters at a different point in life. Um, I don't want to get too much into it because I don't know if things are going to change as the story
Right.
develops, or if I'm going to
Right.
go back and scrap it and try something new.
Well, you have
But
to keep up the suspense here, Greg. You don't want to give it away.
but yeah, it continues, and yeah.
So one thing that's very dear to me as well is Eastern philosophy. And so my question for you, because I'm experiencing that, I'm very much relating to you and your way of thinking. And we come from totally different backgrounds, but education is important to me as well. But how has Eastern philosophy helped you? And if you were to recommend that to others, what would you tell them?
If you were to recommend that to others, I didn't hear your question.
About the Eastern, if you were to recommend, the whole idea of looking into Eastern philosophy, because you've been educated in philosophy, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but also, Eastern philosophy. And so how has that impacted you? And what is it
Mm-hmm.
that you could share with others? Because there's, more people are becoming interested in Eastern thinking.
I think, I mean, again, years ago, I really used to read a lot on Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, and it's like there's a lot of commonalities. Um, one of the things I remember I used to think a lot, especially back in college and probably in my 20s, was I want to attain enlightenment. I want to attain enlightenment. I want to be da da da. And it took me a long time to realize that's not an endpoint. Like, in other words, you don't hit somewhere and a light bulb goes off and you're done.
Right.
I'm trying to remember. I think it was the Three Pillars of Zen. I don't remember what book it was that I read, but there was a circle presented, and kind of the whole thing was that you can learn certain things and get to a really realized point or awakened point, but it doesn't matter if you stay there. Like I hate to use the analogy, but it's like anybody can sit under a tree and just sit there and think. That's not going to get you through life. In other words, the end point of that circle that I'm visualizing in my head, I can't remember what it was called, but the diagram is you got to come back off the mountain. You got to come back down and now practice. And it's like school. You learn something and now you have to kind of test it and see if it's working. And
Right.
Michael in the book, in The Gifted Storyteller, goes through a similar journey where she tells him at the end, because he really comes to some huge awakenings throughout the book, and he says, well, I want to just stay in this process. I don't want to go back to work now, or I don't want to go do this and this and this. She's like, that's not how it works, because that's the only way you're going to understand how much you know is by testing
Right.
yourself and by
Right.
pushing yourself. I mean, if you want to even speak pop culture, in the remake of Superman, that was something that I thought was really cool, that when he's first starting to fly and he's hearing his father's voice, Jor-El's voice in his head, it's his father telling him the only way you will know your true limits is by constantly pushing and testing yourself.
Right.
That's the only way you do know what you can accomplish in life. So he would never know how far he could fly unless he said, well, I'm going to push myself further. I'm going to push
Right.
myself faster. And it's a great
Right.
metaphor for life, because we do get tired. We do get exhausted. We do feel overwhelmed, but you got to push through. And what's next? Because you never know what's on the other side of that wall. You know, for lack of better words, everything that you've been waiting for could be on the other side of that wall. And you may be one more bang of the rock away before
Right.
cracking the whole wall open. You have no way of knowing.
Right.
So you got to keep driving yourself and pushing yourself. And for me, that's an essential, question in my life. It's a piece that even though that doesn't mean I don't take time. There are certain days I'm like, okay, I'm done tonight. I'm just watching TV and vegging out and
Right.
relaxing. But that can't be an everyday thing. Not if you're going to improve your life. Not if you're going to take the gift that we are given, which is the fact that we are alive, and use it to better yourself and better the people around you.
Yeah, and like Winston Churchill says, never, never, never give up. And that's so true. I mean, if you really believe in something, and it's no one ever told you it's going to be easy. Sometimes it's hard work. Sometimes it is easy, but many times it's hard work, and the reward comes, at that very end. And so, my question for you then is that, do you do any private coaching? I think so many people would benefit from your wisdom and your insights and your perspectives.
Thank you. What was the question? I'm sorry, you broke up a little.
So, do you do any coaching? Do you do any private coaching or business coaching, or how can
I
people
don't.
find you?
Right. Okay. So there's a website, thegiftedstoryteller.com. They can
Mhm.
email me at Gregg with two G's, Gregg, at thegiftedstoryteller.com. Um, Facebook.com/thegiftedstoryteller. Twitter, I'm a little different. It's at thegiftedstory. But people can contact me. And honestly, I'm coaching, not like, in other words, I'm helping people. If people email me, I respond to every email. I respond to every, Facebook instant message I get, whatever, because I do want to help people reframe. And down the line, I'll be doing more coaching and more speaking and things of that lines. I'm actually looking for more opportunities to do speaking. So if you know of anybody, or if any of your listeners are out there, yeah, please contact me, because I would love to. Because the more I can kind of get the message out that Well, again, it's not a new message. It's just I'm relaying a message that's been there for, in a sense, thousands upon years from other people and other
Right.
philosophies. The more you can look within yourself and evolve yourself, like Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. I find
Right.
so often that when things frustrate me, and if I think, well, this person needs to do this differently, or that person needs to do that differently, instead of doing that, I just start saying, well, how did I contribute to this?
Right.
Again, how did I make this happen? What am I
Right.
saying, or what am I going to do? So,
Right.
so again, yeah, people can reach me straight out. The easiest way is thegiftedstoryteller.com. I do hope people will pick up the book and read it. Thankful to say I've been getting all 5-star reviews on Amazon so far. Hope to continue that pattern. But I think the book is a really good starting place. And absolutely reach out to me and contact me with thoughts, comments, questions. I would love that.
Yeah, and hopefully, we'll be doing a longer interview in the future because I really do believe what you have to share is very important. And that's the whole purpose of this platform is to have these kinds of conversations with talented, gifted people like yourself that, get to share their wisdom, their insights, their perspectives, their way of doing things. And really, as you said, just to improve your life, just to better your life. It's all about that personal empowerment so that you can actually design the life that you desire and actually manifest that. And that's what this is all about. I do believe, that these challenges that we meet in our life, these frustrations or disturbances, as I like to call them, they're just simply opportunities to work on ourselves. And you're spot on all of that because
Thank you.
ultimately, I do believe that we all desire divine happiness, and the only way to get that is to resolve whatever makes us unhappy. And so my last question, for you, and I know our time is almost up, and I think I could talk with you for a long time, is as you look forward, what is your personal vision for having an impact on the world? Because it'll be fun to see that being manifested.
Um, well, honestly, I hope for it to grow. I do want to write more. I do want to do more speaking. I do want to do coaching. Um, in all realms, but also in terms of education, whether it's in a business or with education itself. But I want to help people not only help themselves, but help others. So
Right.
down the line, when I look down the line, I see myself doing more of that. In other words, I'm still loving what I'm doing at work right now in terms of being an educator, and I want to
Right.
continue that. But you never know what the future is going to bring, and I'm open to everything and anything, to be honest with you. It's just we have to see how it all maps out and how it moves forward. But
Awesome.
the more people read and the more people give me an opportunity to speak to them and work with them, the more this message can grow.
And I have to say one thing, and as an educator yourself, lots of respect for what it is that you do. I've been very fortunate with great education my entire life, and I realize how it's impacted me, and I can only imagine that with the right education, right educators like yourself, that you can change so many people's lives, and our whole world will be different. If we all had a great education in ways that really matter more than anything else, and you can learn all the math and the science and geography, which are wonderful things. But the real difference is the type of things that you just discussed today. And I really want to thank you for that. So, with
Thank
that
you.
said, any last words of wisdom before I let you go?
The last thing I think that just popped into my head is I just want to tell people to think. In other words, think differently. Well, that's such a bite off of Steve Jobs, but think differently. In other words, if you find you're running the same thoughts, if you find you're running into the same problems over and over, challenge yourself. Challenge yourself to try something new and allow it to feel a little silly or uncomfortable or strange, or that's okay. It's if you're doing the same thing over and over, it is comfort. But sometimes if you want to change something, you have to be a little uncomfortable in the process to make that
Right.
change. That doesn't mean that, again, once you jump that hurdle, that you're not going to find you're 10,000 times more comfortable. But that's what I would say to listeners right now is push yourself a little. If there's something weighing on your mind, really question it, really challenge yourself to say, even if you need to use other people as an example, well, how would Dr. Rademaker, answer this question? How would Gregg Korrol answer this question? And I find when I do that, and that's kind of what goes on within the book also, because the character Jeannie is a lot of when I'm stuck and I sit there and say, to, well, what should I be doing? It's that voice in my head that pops out, well, this is what you should be doing, or this is what so-and-so might do. Give it a shot. And
Love
it's
it.
a journey. It's a journey, but it's well worth it.
I love it. I love it. Gregg, thank you so much. We'll definitely have more conversations, and hopefully in the future, we'll have people calling in and asking questions to you as well. And get the book. Everybody listen, get the Gifted Storyteller. It's a great book. I plan on getting it and reading it. And thank you so much once again, Gregg.
Thank you so much, Bart. I really appreciate it.